Hello, and welcome to Ideas with Diana on this May 2nd, 2022. This is the second podcast I did today, so I felt inspired to do it. And what I'm doing is I'm going to do a science commentary sort of using a science fiction analogy. So I made a playlist which I call Playlist 3, which I included clips from Doctor Who on the War Game, on the Doctor Who on the episode of the War Games, also Doctor Who, the Trial of the Time Lord. Tom Laughlin, who played Billy Jack from the Billy Jack movie with the song One Tin Soldier, and One Tin Soldier, the original cartoon video that I saw on the Sonny and Cher show uh, when I was much younger. Now, regarding current events, in some ways, when I worked as emergency management chairman for Society for Computer Simulation, I would have some people who would cringe when I would use science fiction analogies like Star Trek. They say, well, you're one of those flower children, Chucky people, or something like this. And there's a reason why I used it because basically sometimes a story or a myth is still a better way to express an idea because basically it takes a person away from the current event. Like Joseph Campbell said, when someone really believes in faith, they are taken away from what actually exists and brought up to a higher plane. And that's the same thing like a good science fiction story as well, even though it may be rather dystopian or may be rather harsh. Excuse me, I just need to get something to drink a little bit. My throat's a little bit dry, so um, well, now the clips I included there, although I'm a fan of Star Trek and I do like the new series Picard because basically it has gone back to its original roots and it's also like what was like some of my conservative friends have told me the criticism of the first original Star Trek series was as too like oh, we don't do those things anymore. And in the latest season of Star Trek that was changed. Like for example, one point there was, oh, we don't use money anymore, but then the character the Ferengi was brought in showing that actually you can't have a hegemonic empire without any type of commerce. That's a pipe dream that's really is a big fallacy. Now, the clips I put in, well, let's start with one thing as well too. In addition to being a Star Trek fan, I'm also a Doctor Who fan, a Whoite. My first Doctor Who episode I actually saw was Peter Davison. It was the one where they time traveled back to prehistoric Earth, and they're using the air from a tire from a tire of a Concorde to restart the engines. And then what happened due to the way series were distributed back then, as I watched it through Channel 11 in Chicago, WTTW, they went back to the Tom Baker um, first episode, so Robot. So Peter Davison was my first episode Doctor Who I saw on TV, and Robot was actually my second. And eventually, through the Doctor Who cover Parkside, and also I was able to watch all the Doctor Who's as well as through BritBox. And I'm glad BritBox was able to bring back some of the Patrick Troughton ones because there are a lot of good episodes that were lost in the past. Now, about the episodes I put on my playlist, playlist 3. Well, the first episode is the War Games. The reason why I put that on is, in some ways, when I think of current events today, I almost think of it as the War Games, like as two groups have become like the Time Lords, basically. Very all-knowing, all-seeing. So they think, well, they get bored, so they get groups of people to fight with each other for sport, just like the Romans did in the ancient gladiatorial games. And what happens in the Time Lords, everyone feels the Time Lords are very much, very, very good, very tight. But the Doctor is actually one that says, well, look, you guys have really think too highly of yourselves, that they have too much of an ego. You really have lost something by not going out in the field and just, staying in your virtual reality of Gallifrey and not doing anything. And it says even in the past, the gladiatorial games were banned, and in the war games, what happens? The doctor finally realizes what's going on with all these groups that are fighting each other. They one group fighting here, one group is Romans, one group World War One, another group is 22nd century soldiers. He finally puts it together, and then what happens at one point says, well, even though he doesn't like how the Time Lords have do things all the time, he said, well, eventually got summons, so he summons them. And when he does summon, they agree to send the end of war and end the war games and send, but then they put him on trial and say, well, and he says, well, wait a minute. He says, I'm not the one, you're the one at fault here. You let some of your people get so egotistical, so high in the thoughts, so much of reminding their cone, or so elitist that you got bored and wanted to start a little war, pit certain people as proxies against each other. And what happens some of the time where said, well, we agree with you. However, we have to set policy for civilization. So what they did was they sent him back to Earth temporarily until things blew over, but so that he basically they could say they did something. Now, in the trial of the Time Lord, what it was is about a case where the Time Lords were doing, again, some the elites became so bored they did an out of control experiment, and it caused a fireball that almost blew up the Earth. So they transferred the Earth out of the way of the fireball to another galaxy far away. What happens when they transferred it? They didn't tell the people that they actually were from Earth. They made them think that they were like a primitive people. But yet, when you saw like reports that says HMS Ecology Report, meaning Her Majesty's Service Stationary Report, which to those in England was a big chuckle because basically it's interesting. The people and books that survived were actually government reports, and that's in the U.S. it'd be the same as basically Congressional Report number 7 or something like that. So what happened was the doctor is called to fix the Time Lord's mess. He and not asked, but actually just pulled in. And what happens? He realizes, well, the Time Lords really made a big boo-boo. They're trying to cover this up, and finally, in the clip, what happened was he actually criticizes the Time and saying, well, you have become so arrogant, so corrupt in the time that you have, or the technology you have, you don't even know it. You need to take a look at yourselves. And again, this was a very influential episode because many people, basically those who are Doctor Who fans, when they think of the Time Lords, they think of any type of elite in society or any type of elite that's making primary decisions that impact lots of people. And when they think of the Doctor, the elites always call the Doctor, well, you're a renegade, you're a misfit, you're not fit to live on Gallifrey. But actually what happens, in one episode, Shada, that actually showed the Doctor was actually a very high level Time Lord who actually chose to live out and to go out in the field so that basically he could keep a balance. With the clip with Billy Jack, I included the clip from One Tin Soldier. The thing about that clip is that it shows him where he's met in the square. He goes in the square, looks, says, GP knows someone pulled out the distributor wire. So in those days, a distributor wire connected the spark plug to the cap, and you couldn't start your car. So what happens? He goes in, he sees a group of people, and he asks, boy. Then he sees them closing them. And first, what happens? He sort of tries to walk away from each of them non-violently. But finally, the head honcho comes and says, "Well, you're in my town, and you're going to do what I do." And what happened was he still holds back. The head honcho throws the first punch. He defends himself. Then he sends his extra goons to come in. Again, just like a case of a Time Lord where you have the elites having the little people fight, as elites would think, like proxies. And so it shows basically as one person, he's able to use his karate skills, as well as the skills that he learned being part American Indian to defeat them, and also to keep calm and not practice malice. Well, when with these different videos in the playlist, when I think of current events, sometimes I do wonder basically if some decision making made on high is really like almost like a group of elitist time lords who think, well, we're bored, we want to have proxies fight for our entertainment, or we're such and such and such and such, and you know, um, or even like in Billy Jack, where you have someone that's head of a town and says, well, this is my town, your people are not wanted, and such like that. And that's what I'm saying is basically sometimes we really need to consider, how do we treat others, and what happens when someone who is supposed to represent, the people or the country starts to think elitist and starts to act like that, where they get bored, they initiates a proxy war, or basically a proxy gang fight like in Billy Jack or so like that. No, now in my time, when I was in college, and even till a few years ago, before big tech started to act as a government, people would speak out. I mean, even up to 2008, I mean, I go out to coffee shops and I'd hear people talking very much on different issues, and it wasn't, they weren't talking groupthink. They were friends, but they're saying, well, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Even when I did my software projects, as a friend of mine, Walter, we'd meet and discuss the software, but also we discussed economic policy. At that time, I was a Keynesian, meaning that basically I believe very much liberal economics, and government should supply many different things. And Walter was from the Freeman School, but later when I realized that there has to be a limit to Keynesian economics, and so I sort of moved more towards the Freeman School, believing that no, we need to have a social safety net, we need to have limited universal basic income, and we need to do universal income on a limited basis, um, as like was done during the pandemic in the U.S. with the stimulus, and in England, with providing salaries to those in theater and other fields that were affected by the pandemic. However, the whole thing is, the reason I put the clips on is because sometimes I do think when I listen to the news today, I get a chance to listen to many newscasts, United States and internationally, like Deutsche Welle, France 24, RT, others. I do think sometimes on some newscasts, that basically it's, again, I did this analogy before, very narrow point of view, and really when you have what some people think is elitist thinking that's causing current crises in world events, you really don't need this type of view. You need to see all of it. And also, it's like, basically, just to show an example here, you know, like when I go on Barnes and Noble each Sunday, when I can, I buy a latte and buy a book for $5. Now, what happens if the latest view was completely right? There would only be one book that we are supposed to read at the latest view, because basically their view is completely knowledgeable. Their view is such and such, and everyone knows that when someone says that, they said, "What have you been smoking? Are you sure you're thinking right?" Because when you go to, the reason why Barnes and Noble has more, because what happens, there are different points of view, and one group does not have the knowledge or the ability to solve all problems. Also, each group is not perfect. They will make mistakes. They're gonna do things that on incomplete information, and sometimes, even like in Billy Jack, one group will throw the first punch, and another group will have to defend themselves. But even in the Billy Jack movies, when Billy Jack was attacked, one thing what he always did was he never took malice. He never took vengeance. His thing was basically to first, and the first stopped the fighting that was done. Then afterwards, he still came up to the group that threw the first punch and said, "Look, can we talk? No, can we really talk about what happened and what and work together?" And he is like what my dad used to tell me: move on and forward, move on and forward. So take a look at these clips. Let me know what you think. But I think in this current crisis, we really need to get the elites out of the picture on both sides of this. And we need to find a way to move on and forward and start to talk again about how to really end this, even in a negotiated settlement. Thank you.